feel it today, but you will likely feel it soon. We're talking about the $85 billion in federal funds that's getting axed. President Obama signed the order yesterday after 11th-hour talks fizzled out. It's not that he wanted to sign it. He had to sign it by law because Congress didn't act, didn't reach a deal. Some say didn't lift a finger. In fact, most members fled town before the deadline even approached. Joining me now, Congressman Michael Grimm, Republican from New York, and Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I want to talk to you, Congressman Grimm, first. President Obama said yesterday that he's willing to compromise and do some things that even his own party might not like in order to strike a deal. I know that there is a general mistrust of President Obama in your party, but what is your side willing to do, if anything?
Well, first of all, we're ready to sit down and do that, but it's very difficult to take the president at his word when he spent the last week and a half campaigning against us and beating us up and blaming us.
But sit down and do what, Congressman? Because if Republicans say that they are not going to budge on tax increases, which the president is demanding, do you think that he's just being completely disingenuous in saying that he will budge?
Oh, absolutely. I think his actions, I'm tired of hearing the president's rhetoric. Let's just see actions. If he really wants to come to the table and have smarter cuts and work with us, then that's actually what you do. You sit down. Why hasn't he invited members over to the White House to discuss these things?
But you're not
once have I been invited. Never. He doesn't want to discuss policy. He wants to campaign for 2014. This is all optics to try to blame Republicans for 2014.
In your mind, tax increases completely off the table. That's not anything that you would budge on.
Well, we already gave him taxes. The fiscal cliff just passed. He got $620 billion in new taxes, and we were told then that if we agreed to the tax hikes, that the cuts would come next. So we did our part, $620 billion new in taxes. That's on top of $1 trillion that the president got in his Obamacare. There's $1 trillion more taxes in Obamacare, $620 billion thanks to the fiscal cliff, which we agreed to. And now that it's time to cut, he's saying he wants more taxes. That is the ultimate act of being disingenuous.
Let me get Congressman Schiff in here. I want to be tough on you too, sir, because I watched Congress leave town last week when nothing was done, and here we came to yesterday where the president had to sign this executive order. These were spending cuts that Congress put in place that were never supposed to go into effect. And a day before they did, Congress leaves town, walks down the steps. Any regular American looking at that kind of throws their hands in the air and says, what the heck is going on here? I mean, how do you tell Americans and your constituents that Congress is doing the work?
Well, Congress isn't doing the work, and in fact, I stayed here in town, and I think it was irresponsible for us to recess and adjourn the way we did with this serious cut going into effect. And they are stupid cuts that cut across the board, that cut the good and the bad, the efficient with the inefficient. But look, the president has compromised. The president has accepted, and Democrats have accepted, $1.2 trillion already in cuts. Only $600 billion in new revenues. So even before the sequester, it was 2-to-1 cuts to new revenue. And we are, even before the sequester, down to non-discretionary spending, the lowest levels in 50 years. And we're trying to negotiate with a House GOP that says they won't get rid of a single special interest tax deduction, not for hedge fund billionaires, not for jet plane owners, not for the oil industry that's making record profits, without going to what? Lowest non-discretionary spending in 100 years? We're simply not going to sacrifice health care for poor seniors to preserve special interest tax breaks for hedge fund billionaires. That's not what voters voted for.
Congressman Grimm, will you respond to that for me?
Yeah, that sounds great. It simply isn't true. First of all, it's the Republicans for years now that have been beating the drum for overall tax reform. I am for tax reform, which includes closing loopholes. We've said that now for years. We want to do an overall tax reform, but we're not going to cherry pick out now closing loopholes so that the president can spend more money. The reality is, what did the Senate do just yesterday or the day before? They voted on a Democrat package to get rid of the spending for spending cuts for 2013 and 14, and to increase spending and to raise taxes. The truth is they want to close loopholes to spend more money, not pay down our debt and deficits. That's what they really want to do, is tax more and spend more. We're not going to do that. We want to do overall tax reform, absolutely. But we want that tax reform to go towards paying down a debt that is crippling our nation and costing us jobs and endangering our future.
I want to ask you both a question.
Brianna, if I could just respond to that briefly, because it's very indicative. They're willing to do tax reform as long as it doesn't raise any new revenue. Well, you can't pay down the deficit and debt if you do tax reform that doesn't raise new revenue. It's like saying we're in favor of spending cuts as long as they're revenue neutral. That kind of defeats the purpose. If we can't get rid of
actually, it doesn't.
It actually grows the economy. I only have a little bit of time, and I want to get a question in to both of you. If you can just answer succinctly for me. I want to know what you would say to your constituents who are watching right now, who are worried that these cuts could affect them. You know, we're seeing this will affect education. This will affect national parks. This could cause delays in airports. All kinds of things, all kinds of effects. What do you say to them specifically about what you are willing to do to strike a deal here in the next coming weeks?
Very simply,
I would say to my constituents that I'm willing to support something balanced, something that makes additional cuts but also raises new revenues, something that's fair, essentially something that you voted for in November. And I think that's the way forward. I think that's ultimately where we're going to get. But I think the House GOP made the decision months ago they were going to allow the sequester to go into effect, that this was the way of managing their Tea Party caucus. And unfortunately, the country's going to have to suffer these cuts until there's enough pressure on them to come to the table and get to yes.
Congressman Grimm?
Okay, very simply, to all of my constituents, the House has passed 2 different alternatives already because we know we can cut smarter. These across-the-board cuts nobody wants to do. So we already put 2 different things on the table. All we need is for the Democrats to come back and say, well, we agree to this part, but not